So for today's video, we're going to need not too many supplies. I'm going to be demonstrating this tutorial using sock yarn today. Now you can use any weight of yarn you prefer. Just remember to use the appropriate size hook for the yarn you happen to be using. Otherwise, it should work out pretty good. I haven't tried this with thread, so I can't tell you what it's like with thread, but my suspicions are if you choose to do maybe a micro version of this, you're probably going to be okay. Now, the yarn I am using, again, is a sock yarn, and this yarn comes from Lichen and Lace. They're an independent dyer out of Canada. Yeah, that's right, Canada. If you want more information on this particular company, I will leave a link to a video on my other channel that talks about them a little bit and what you can expect from them. Now, because I'm using a sock yarn, I'm going to be using a 3mm hook. Basically, in US terms, this is going to be an E hook. Also, a pair of scissors, as you would expect. I will also need a tapestry needle. The size of the tapestry needle is going to really depend on the weight of the yarn you're using. So long as the yarn itself can fit through the eye of the needle you're using, you should be okay. Next, I'm going to use a set of safety eyes. Now, these are just eyes that I am using. You may choose to use buttons. You use any size eye that you think is going to work for the piece you are making. It can be beads. It can be embroidered eyes. You get to choose. It's not that big of a deal. And as we progress into this tutorial, you're gonna see why. So just use what you have available or what you want to use, and it's going to be okay. Also, depending on the eyes that you use, you may need some craft glue. This is strictly optional, and again is going to be dependent on the safety eyes or how you install your safety eyes. And last but not least, you're going to need chenille stems or pipe cleaners, whatever you want to call them. I choose to use two 12-inch pipe cleaners for this size of Grumpy Toad. And you'll see why. If you're using a heavier weight yarn or a lighter weight yarn, you're going to have to make some adjustments that I'm not going to get into with this video because I'm going to be placing this pattern up for sale. I think possibly on Etsy. Anyways, when the pattern's done, I will put more information of that into the comments section below. When I get there, I'll pin that. So it may not be there at the time that this video drops, but it will eventually be there. I'm going to begin this piece with the legs, and so I'm going to want to make two of these legs. I'll go ahead and make one here to show you the process. I'm just going to go ahead and make a slip stitch, and then I'm going to chain 31. So 1, 2, 3, 29, 30, and 31. Now, in row 1, I am going to want to single crochet in the third loop, or you might know it as the back hump only. So I'm going to turn my work, and then in the second hump or third loop from my hook, so this is where my hook would be, and this is going to be the first, and this one will be the second, that little bump on the back of your chain. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to end up with a total of 30 single crochets in that third loop only. Now, once you've completed row 1, you should have something that looks similar to this. I'm going to move on to row 2. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to turn my work. or turn your work first and then chain one. Either way, it all depends on how it's written. And then for this row, I'm going to work in the third loop only as well. So I'll show those of you who aren't sure what I'm talking about. So this is going to be your right facing part of your work where you see your single crochets and what we have just completed. Now when I turn this around, we're going to have the back facing piece of the work. And even though we're staring at the back, the third loop is going to be facing you. And the third loop is this one right here. You see right there? And you've got one right here. Okay, so for those of you who are familiar, this will be the front loop. This will be the back loop. And this will be your third loop. So we're going to work in this third loop. So again, for row 2, I've got my first chain made, and I'm going to single crochet third loop only 30 times. So I'm going to begin in the same chain, or rather the same single crochet that I chained from. So this is going to be my first stitch right in here. And then my second stitch. And my third single crochet. And then so on and so forth. I'll meet you right back here when I've completed row 2. Now, when you've finished row 2, you should have something that looks like this. Next, I'm going to turn my work. I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to begin row 3. Now, for row 3, I'm simply going to single crochet back loop only. So this would be my front loop because it's facing me. So let me just back up just a hair for those of you who might be getting a little confused. When you're just dealing strictly with back loop only and front loop only, you always work from what is facing you. So the top loop that's facing you is always the front loop, and then the loop behind it is always the back loop. And if I turned my work, then again, the front loop would be the loop that's facing me, and the back loop would be the loop behind it. Now, that's a little different when we're dealing with the third loop. The third loop always ends up on the back of your work. So whether the back is facing you or facing away from you, that third loop is always going to be back there. So if I seem like I contradicted myself a little earlier in the video, I really didn't. There's just some caveats that sometimes you kind of have to just wrap your mind around. And this is just one of those. So it's just one of those little sort of kind of rules that, you know, just is what it is. So it's just best to memorize it rather than trying to figure it out. Okay, so for row 3, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a single crochet back loop only. So basically, I'm going to be working off the very first single crochet that my turning chain has come off of, and I'm going to back loop only. And I'm going to make 30 of those total, and that will complete row 3. Now, when you've completed row 3, you should have something that looks like this. And so next I'm going to turn my work, and I'm going to chain 1, and I am going to repeat row 2, and row 2 is basically a single crochet in the third loop only. So again, I'm going to do 30 single crochets in the third loop only for row 4. And once you've completed row 4, your piece should look something like this. Now keep in mind the back side of your work is going to be relatively flat, while the front side of your work is the side that looks more knitted and has more texture. So again, I'm going to turn my work. I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to start with row 5. And for row 5, I'm going to repeat row 3. And row 3 is basically single crochet back loop only. So I'm going to end up with 30 single crochets in the back loop only. Next, I'm going to turn my work, and I'm going to begin row 6. So I'm going to start row 6 with a chain 1. And then I'm going to work in the 3rd loop only, but this time I'm only going to make 6 single crochets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Again, I'm going to turn my work, and I'm going to begin row 7 by chaining 1. And then I'm going to single crochet 6 single crochets in the back loop only. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So now once I have it folded over corner to corner, I'm going to begin my row 8. And I'm going to start row 8 by inserting my hook into the opposite corner and yarn overing, and then pulling that yarn through, and then create a chain. So basically I slip stitch the corners together, and then I make a chain. And then next I'm going to single crochet 5 across. So I'm going to single crochet both sides of the fold 5 times across. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So basically what I've done is I've closed that foot. Next, I'm going to turn my work, and I'm going to start row 9. And row 9 is going to basically be our toes. So in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I'm going to place a half double crochet 3 times in that back hump, beginning the second hump from the hook. So that's going to be my first half double crochet, and then my second half double crochet, and finally my third half double crochet. I have my 3 half double crochets. And then what I'm going to do is in the next single crochet here along the base of the foot, I'm going to place a single crochet. And then I'm going to repeat what I did for the first toe. I'm going to chain 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I'm going to half double crochet 3 times in the back hump. So 1, 2, and 3. And then in this next single crochet, I'm going to place a single crochet. I'm going to do it 2 more times. 1, 2, 3, 4, or rather 2 more toes. Again, same thing, chain 4, then half double crochet 3, and then single crochet in the next single crochet. And then when I've finished that 4th toe, I should have something that looks like this, or you should have something that looks like this rather. And then what I'm going to do is right down here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to place a slip stitch. Now, what I want to do is I want to leave myself a tail. Oh, that is approximately 3 times the length of my leg. Now that I've threaded my needle, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do something a little different just to add a little more structure to my toes and my feet. I'm going to take my needle and I'm just going to kind of run it through this foot, sort of on the inside so it's invisible. And I'm not going to pull very tight. I'm just going to pull it just tight enough to bring it through snugly. And then I'm going to run my needle and my yarn kind of the same way up my toe. Just like that. And I'm going to run it back down. Again, don't pull too tight, just snug enough that there's no loose yarn, but not so tight that you cause any part of this foot to gather. Just like so. And then again, I'm going to run this up the next toe. And I'm going to do this with each toe. So when I've finished doing that, I have my leg looks something like this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this aside and I'm going to make one more. And then when I've completed the next one, I'm going to also set that leg aside. And towards the end of the video, that's when the assembly process is going to take place and we will be dealing with the foot again. Now next we're moving on to the arms and we're going to make 2 of those. I'm going to begin with my slip knot, of course. And this time I'm going to chain 21. So 1, 2, 3, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. So I got my 21 chains made. And just like before, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to single crochet in the 3rd loop 20 times. So I'm going to skip this first hump and I'm going to hit the 2nd hump for my hook. And that will be my first single crochet. I'm going to single crochet in this 3rd loop 29 more times. So once I have row 1 completed, mine looks like this and yours should too. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn my work. And then for row 2, I'm going to chain 1. And then I'm going to single crochet in the 3rd loop only 20 times. So again, I'm going to begin with the very first single crochet of my row, which is also the single crochet that we've got the turning stitch off of. Just like that. Now I'm going to do it 18 more times. Now that row 2 is completed, I'm going to go ahead and turn my work. I'm going to chain 1. And then for row 3, I'm going to single crochet, back loop only, 20 times. 2, 3. Then again, I'm going to turn my work. I'm going to chain 1. And now I'm going to begin row 4. And row 4, I'm going to repeat row 2. And row 2 is basically your chain 1 and then single crochet in the 3rd loop only 20 times. Okay, so once you've completed row 4, your piece should look like this. And we're going to begin row 5. Now for row 5, I'm just going to pivot my work. I'm not going to turn my work. So I'm now going to work across the wrist of the arm. I'm going to begin that by making a chain 1. And then I'm going to single crochet 4 across. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to turn my work. And that's basically completed row 5. And now I'm going to move into row 6. And for row 6, we're going to make fingers. And I'm going to begin that by making a chain of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And just like with the toes, I'm going to half double crochet in the back hump of these chains. And basically make a half double crochet in the next 3 stitches. Just like with the toes. And then I'm going to go to the next single crochet and I'm going to make a single crochet. And then I'm going to chain 4 again. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And again, I'm going to half double crochet in the next 3 back humps. So 1, 2, and 3. And then again, I'm going to single crochet in that next stitch. Just like that. I'm going to make one more finger. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then half double crochet 3 times. And then I'm going to single crochet in that last single crochet. And now I'm going to go ahead and in this one little corner piece, I'm going to make the slip stitch. Again, I'm going to cut a tail about 3 times the length of my arm here. And then just like with the toes, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to thread my needle. And then I'm going to run my yarn up through each finger. And then when I come right down here to the side of the wrist of my hand on the opposite end, I'm going to simply put my arm aside. I'm going to make another arm. And then I'll save both arms for the assembly process later in the video. Now the body and the toad of the frog are worked in one piece. And we're going to use both color yarns. Now, the legs and the arms were worked in color B. And so for the body, we're going to start with color A, and then we're going to change colors a little less than midway into color B. Now, hang tight and I'll show you what that looks like. We're going to do that color change a few times while creating the body. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make my slip stitch in color A. And then I'm going to chain 21. So 1, 2, 19, 20, and 21. Next, I'm going to change colors to color B. So color A is going to end up being the color of the belly, and color B will be the color of the rest of the frog. And then basically I'm going to tie in my color B. I'm going to tighten that slip stitch there from my color A. I think you can see, so you set loose, I just tighten it up a little bit. And then now that I've tied in my color B, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to chain 29. So 1, 2, 3. Now the next thing we want to do is going to start single crochets, and I'm going to single crochet in the second chain from the hook. So that'll be once. And then I'm going to single crochet 27 more times. So now we have one more single crochet to make in this color B, but this is also the changing color. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start my single crochet. And then I'm going to change colors. So for those of you who don't know, when you change colors, you start the single crochet, and then before you finish the last step, you pull in your new color. And then I'm going to continue to single crochet. So this last chain that I used to connect with the color B chain, I'm going to basically skip that because I'm treating where color A chain tied into color B chain as one chain. So I'm going to continue to the next chain right here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to single crochet 20, and that will finish up my row 1. So when you've completed row 1, you should have something that looks like this. Now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to turn my work. And then for row 2, I'm going to chain 1. And then I'm going to, at this point, single crochet 3rd loop. So just like before. I'm going to now, these first of the 3rd loops is always a little tricky. It's kind of in there pretty good. So it takes a quick moment to find that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to single crochet 3rd loop only 20 times, right? And so at that 20th time, that's where I'm going to change colors. So we've got 1, 2. So now once we've completed our total of 20 single crochets, I have just changed colors right here to my color B. And with color B, I'm going to continue making a single crochet in the 3rd loop of each stitch. So that's going to give me a total of 27 single crochets. And I'm going to start in right back here into the 3rd loop. Now, the reason why I mentioned that is because it gets kind of hidden back here behind where the color change occurs. So just be careful not to work right past that without realizing it. So that'll be my first one, and now I'm going to single crochet 20. Now once you've completed row 2, you should have something that resembles this. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to turn my work. I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to begin row 3. And for row 3, I'm going to work in the back loop only. So I'm going to single crochet 27 here in color B. And then I'm going to change colors to color A, and then continue to chain 20 in the back loop only with color A. And when we've completed row 3, I'll meet you right back here. So now row 3 is completed, and you have something that looks like this. And like with the arms and the legs, you're going to have the back of your work is going to be relatively flat. And the front of your work is going to be where you see the texture or the knit look stitches. Now we're going to move on, and what we're going to do is we're going to repeat rows 2 and 3 more times. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that, and then once you've completed what would have been row 9, because that would have been the end of repeating your rows 2 and 3 times, I will meet you right back here so that we can begin row 10. Once you've completed row 9, you should have a piece that looks something similar to this. Now we're going to move on to row 10. And basically row 10 is a repeat of row 2. So we're going to turn our work. We're going to chain 1. And then I'm going to single crochet in that 3rd loop through the length of row 10 one more time. With row 10 finished, it's time to fasten off these yarns, but before you do that, you're going to want the yarn to be about, 1.5 lengths the piece. And then also same with the color B yarn. Except this one really just needs to be about a length, if that much. And set that aside for a moment because we're going to be using that needle in a minute, and go ahead and slip stitch right there. So now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my color B tail and I'm going to go ahead and thread that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to pick up the very tips of the stitches on this edge. Because what I want to do is I want to gather this edge together. But I don't want to go any deeper into these stitches than the very top edging of the stitches themselves. They're on that edge row, just like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to gather. And then I'm just going to run my stitch again. Take my needle and run it through the top of those stitches again, because I want to make a very tight gather and I want to basically make sure this is tied very tightly like that. So this is what I'm doing. I'm rounding that edge out like that by gathering the whole length of it together to create this kind of rounded cap, if you like. And then I'm just going to go ahead and fasten it shut. And then I'm going to go ahead and weave in this remainder part of the tail. Then next, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to thread my color A. And this time with color A, I'm going to weave this bit of color all the way up to this corner. Don't pull very tight, because really this is what we're going to use to gather the color A in, just like we gathered the color B end. So make sure you're running it up on the inside or the back facing piece of the fabric. We're just going to run it right here to this corner. And again, just like before, make a gather, just picking up the very top portion of this edging. Okay, so now your piece should look something like this. And the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and fold right here on the line where the color change occurs. So you can already kind of see how this is coming along. So we're pretty much finished with color A now, but we're going to continue to work with color B. So right here at this part where the two colors join, I am going to slip my hook right here into the back loops of these piece sides, and then I'm just going to tie in with a slip stitch. And then I'm going to single crochet back loops only 14 times. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I now have joined my two sides. by single crocheting 14 in the back loop only. Okay, so next, working right back here in this back loop, continuing on. So basically it's going to be facing us. I'm going to be working in this loop right here. I'm going to single crochet 7. We're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So I guess, well, technically that would really kind of be the front loop, right? So it gets a little tricky between back loop and front loop, you know, when you're working on a piece that folds in on itself like this. Okay, so at any rate, we've got the 7. And then I'm going to turn my work. I'm going to chain 1. And then I'm going to proceed to single crochet 7 in the back loop only. So 1, 2. Then right here where we got this corner at, again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to slip stitch. This again. So now that I've made my turn, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to single crochet back loops only. And I'm going to continue that pretty much for the last 7 stitches. And it's going to bring me right back here to this last 7th stitch. And it's going to bring me right here to the center of this gathering. So now you have something that looks like this. And from here, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to fasten off this color A, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to then take this color, tie it down here, and repeat what I just did on the right side of the body. But while I'm at this, I'm just going to go ahead and weave this in now. This is really a good time to do that. So again, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to tie right in here, right where the 2 colors meet. And then I'm going to do back loop only. And in this case, because this edging right here was basically the chain edging from when we first started this, we're really going to be working, our back loop is going to be that back hump. So we're going to go ahead and do our 14 single crochets all the way up this left side of the toad. Now that we've got our 14 single crochets up this side, just like the first time, going to go ahead and in the back loop, which is probably going to be the 3rd loop for you, as it is for me because this was the chain edge of the foundation, I am going to go ahead and then single crochet 7. So 2, and once I've done my 7, I'm going to chain 1, set myself up for my turn and chaining back. And so this time I'm going to single crochet my 7, but it'll be in this, basically this front loop. Maybe 1, 2, and 7. Then again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to slip stitch right here into the corner of this work, just like we did on the other side. And then in the back loops of both sides, I'm going to go ahead and single crochet 7 again. So that'll be 1, oops, I think I didn't get the right one. So pay attention because this can be a little tricky. Okay, and just like before, you want to end right here into this center where the belly part of your piece was gathered. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and give myself a long length of tail, probably twice the length of the body of this toad. And then I want to go ahead and fasten this off. Okay, now this is a good time to lightly stuff the body. And then also, once you've lightly stuffed your body, know that this part right here is going to be the lip of your toad. So it's going to ultimately fold over like this. And we're going to whip stitch it shut like this once we get it stuffed and place the eyes. Now your eyes are going to sit right in here. So you see where we've got this edge right here. It's going to be on this side of that edge that you're going to place your eyes on either side. So you're going to place your eye here and you're going to place your eye here. And this is a good location. So if you need to put in safety eyes and you're placing them there before you close this up, this is the perfect time to do that now. Otherwise, if it can be closed up before you place your eyes, you can close it up and then you can determine where you want to put your eyes later. You know, it just all is however you choose to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lightly stuff this. Okay, so you can see that it's lightly stuffed. It's stuffed just enough to give it a little plumpness, but not so much that it pulls your stitches apart to where you can see the filling. So you can see how squishy that is, give you an idea on how lightly stuffed it is. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to thread my yarn again. And I'm right here in the center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run my needle right here through the center of the gather, right up here on the top body part of the toad. And then I'm just going to pull it down. And then I'm going to continue to whip stitch this edge with this edge, but I'm going to follow the stitches along the edging. So just follow that stitching. Like for the most part, stitch for stitch. You may be off 1 or 2 stitches and that's going to be okay. Same thing with here. You're going to do just a little whip stitch in those back loops just to close this over. Okay, so once you have your flap sewn shut, you can see now that I'm taking that little bit of extra yarn that I have left and I'm just starting to shape things just a touch. So because I know that I want little socket areas to sit my eyes in, because that's what I want to do with my eyes. That's the type of eyes that I'm using. I put them in later because, well, this is not a toy for a small child, so I don't worry too much about the safety eye aspect. I just glue my eye into place. You can do whatever you want. So if you're using a button, go ahead and sew your button into place. If you are using a bead, sew your bead into place. And if you're using safety eyes, you should have already attached those before closing up your flap. Now at this point, you should have something that looks like this. I'm going to move on to the next step, and this next step is going to be the brow of the grumpy toad. So really what I'm going to do here is, and this is a good line to follow, I'm going to start right about here, just on the other side of the eye. And then in each stitch, I'm going to place a half double crochet, and I'm going to follow that half double crochet and stitching all the way around and then up again and over the second eye. And so this is pretty much what I mean by this. So I'm just going to find a stitch that I can tie into. And that right there looks like a pretty good one. I'm going to just start off with a basic slip stitch. And then this little tail, I'm either going to just crochet right over, which I probably will do, or I will weave it in when I'm finished doing all of this. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a stitch, and basically a line of stitches that kind of follows the direction I'm looking for. And then I'm going to make my half double crochet and put it right into that stitch. I'm going to continue to place half double crochets into the line of stitch following the direction that I want my frown or forehead to go into. And then as I do that, I'm going to follow it right down here to the top of the lips. And then as you can see, I followed this line all the way around, and when we get to this very last stitch, I'm just going to go ahead and make a slip stitch into that final piece. And I'm going to cut this, fasten this off. And then I'm going to just go ahead and weave this tail in. So now once you've got your brows on, and you have something that looks like this, I'm going to go ahead and finish up the face by completing the mouth. And again, I'm going to tie in our color B, and I'm going to tie it right in here. Remember back when we had that little chain, or rather single crochet 7, right here you're going to see a bit of a ledge. This is where I'm going to tie into. And again, you can either weave this in or work it into your piece as you move along, whatever you do to hide that tail. And now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to, in each stitch, I'm going to make a slip stitch. And I'm going to make a slip stitch all the way up to just about here. When I get here, I'll show you what to do next. Okay. Now you can see that I've made my slip stitch up to this point. And then next what I'm going to do is I am going to slip stitch both the bottom part of the mouth, of the frown, basically, the lips, and I'm going to connect it right here to this front ridge of the brow. So I'm going to continue through. So you're going to have, 3 or 4 stitches here along the brow line that you're going to pick up. And that's going to vary depending on how you did your half double crochets along the brow, how you stitch those stitches across. And when you get back to the end of that other ridge on the other side, you're going to go ahead and cut yourself a tail. Now, this is a good time to either weave in a moderate sized tail or to cut yourself a longer tail if you think you have a little more shaping to do, something you might want to do. Okay, so now that we've completed all that, I'm going to move on to the legs and the arms. Next thing I want to do now is I want to add the arms. And this is what the pipe cleaner is going to be. Now, normally you can just stick this pipe cleaner right on through, or you can work it through. Sometimes it gets caught up a little bit. So in that case, if you find that that's going to be your problem, just go ahead and get a large yarn needle, something that has an eye that will actually fit your pipe cleaner or your chenille stem, and just fold it over a little bit, and you're going to use this needle as a guide. So I'm going to insert this needle as to about where I want my arm to be, and I want my arm to be sit just below the bottom curve of the Grumpy Toad's frown. And so I'm going to put it right about there, and I'm going to stick my needle through, and I'm going to pull it through about the same location exactly on the other side. So you can see my guys, let me play with it a little bit. So yeah, now you can see that it's about even, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to tug that a little bit, and that'll pull your pipe cleaner right through. I'm going to remove this because I'll use that again for when I put on the legs. So now we have the filling, the inside for each side of the arm. I'm going to get the arms that I completed already, and I have them right here. And I'm going to lay one here abouts, and then one here abouts, here on the other side, so you can kind of see how they're going to go on. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to see about, oh, this is about as long as my arm is going to be on this side. This is the hand. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bend that pipe cleaner up just like so. And so you see that it comes in just underneath the hand or the wrist part, because we don't want that pipe cleaner to go beyond the wrist, because this is where we're going to attach it to the arm. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to see about where my arm sits and where the hand sits, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bend that end of the pipe cleaner up too, so it'll sit just about right. So now that I got that kind of eyeballed and measured out, I'm going to just go ahead, I'm going to twist this stem around itself. And yeah, I do use the Wyrd pipe cleaner and chenille stem interchangeably. I know this. Okay, so now we got the arms ready to go. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew the arms on. I'll show you how I do that. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to thread my yarn into the tapestry needle. And then you see this knitted pattern, this knit look pattern. This is what I want on the outside. And so the more flat pattern, I want that facing the inside of my arm. And really what I'm going to do now is, so you see, here, so you see how I've got it wrapped around this pipe cleaner. I'm going to take my yarn, my needle, and I'm going to whip stitch in the back loops of either side of the arm around this chenille stem, this pipe cleaner. So I'm going to start by doing a nice tight little couple of whips right here where I'm starting my sewing process. And then I'm going to work the back loops. But the one thing I am going to do in terms of working this back loop is I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to stick it right there into the eye that I made with the chenille stem. I'm going to pull that through the back loop. And then I'm going to tighten that up. And what that's going to do is that's going to anchor that stem, the inner aperture, to the outside of the arm. So I'm just going to do and make another round just so that we can hide that. And then from here, I'm just going to simply whip stitch the back loops together, the back loop only of either side of the arm here. And I'm going to do that all the way up the inside. And now once I've got the inside of the arm sewn all the way up, I am going to then whip stitch around the outside of the arm so I can then sew it to the body of our toad. So now you can see how that works, and I have my first bendable arm. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing for the other side. And so now you see that we've got the arms on, and it's going to be time for the legs. Going to do really pretty much basically the same thing. You can go ahead and hook that around a little bit, so it's just easier to run this through exactly where I want. Now for him, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come right here at the corner bottom, and I'm going to bring my needle through to the other side, to the other corner at the bottom. There. So now you can see I've got the aperture, the chenille stem, or if you like, the pipe cleaners through. And we're going to basically do the same thing that we did with the arms. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get my first foot, and I'm going to see about where I'm going to need to bend. And so because the legs are a bit longer than the arms, we're really only going to have a very small tip on either foot to bend. But you do want to bend that up just a hair so that A, you got a little eye so that you can anchor in your yarn, and B, you don't have any poking through the fabric of your leg. I'm going to go ahead and thread this. Now what I want is I want this part right here, this seam, to be on the back side of my frog's leg. So you can see here, I'm going to just slip that in just like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my needle, and I'm going to catch just a little bit of the back loop, and then I'm going to run my needle right through. You can see right through the top part of the thread of the back of the foot. This is what's going to make the heel. And then I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to bring it back through that little bit of loop there on the other side of the leg, and I'm going to swing that back through just like so, and then I'm going to cinch it just like that. And then from there I'm going to just start whip stitching the back loop all the way up. And when I get to the top of the leg, then just like with the arms, I'm going to sew the leg onto the body. So now you can see how the foot is bent. You got the little heel back there. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other side of the foot. So now that's all there is to it. Your grumpy toad is complete. Now, by the end of February 2025, if you're interested, I will have written instructions available for sale on Etsy for these toads, plus some clothing items that I'll have patterns for as well to fit these guys. But pretty much with that said, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I will be seeing you soon. Bye-bye now.